So, what is the difference between being religious and being a Christian, a.k.a. follower of Christ? I am Kat Caldwell, and this is my channel, Floodlights. Today, we're going to be asking the age-old question in churches, are you a Pharisee? Are you? Most of us would probably say no, because none of us want to be that guy or that group of guys that Jesus kept telling were kind of pretty much the worst of the worst. They constantly rubbed up against Jesus, asking him all these deep philosophical questions, I guess theological questions more. And Jesus was always, slamming them down. I mean, if there was a Twitter back then, he would be dropping the mic all the time. He made them look like fools, and that made them hate him even more. Pharisees were religious, right? So in the church these days, whether you are new or whether you've grown up in it, you have heard the word religious thrown around, and it always has this sort of, this bad connotation to it. You don't want to be religious, you want to be authentic, right? And I think it's taken a while, I would say centuries, for us to figure out the difference between religious and being a follower of Christ, basically being a disciple. So when you look at the Gospels, you have the Pharisees, you have Jesus, and you have the disciples, right? So the disciples were pretty normal men walking around, doing their thing, working, and Jesus would come up to them and say, follow me, be my disciple. And growing up in the church, I elevated the disciples, thinking, man, if Jesus chose them, they must have been pretty good already, right? Then, as some of you might know, I left the church. I never stopped believing in God, but I sort of stopped my learning process. And when I came back, and I actually started reading the Bible, which is something I encourage you to do, again, you realize that the disciples were, while they were knowledgeable on things, they were still Jewish. They still, had gone to school. They still knew the laws. They still knew how to act. They were really normal. And it took them a while to get stuff. Like sometimes even the parables, the stories that Jesus would tell, they'd be all, hey, what did that actually mean? After everyone's gone. They didn't want to look like fools in front of everyone else. Like, they did not believe the saying that there is no bad question. These guys were not willing to ask a question in front of people. I mean, think of it. You're a follower of Christ. Like, you're his disciple. You should know this stuff. And if you don't know it, you're going to be like, well, ask him afterwards when everyone's gone. Right? So they weren't the most intelligent, I guess. Although I don't think they were stupid. So it's kind of a reminder that Jesus doesn't just choose you because you're all that before you know him, right? He sees potential in you. He knows what you can become when you follow him. So then the Pharisees were the guys who had gone to the university. These guys are intellectuals. These guys know how to follow the law. And remember, the law was 600 rules? I don't know. My Torah knowledge is pretty... So you got all these laws. You don't just have the 10 Commandments. I mean, you've got law after law after law when you wash your hands. I don't know. It sounds pretty crazy to me. They knew how to do it. So they would come up to Jesus and say all these things. Well, you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, so is it okay to heal on the Sabbath? I have to admit, if I had been, the way that I think in my head, if I had been around back then, I probably would have been like, yeah, is it? Siding with the Pharisees every once in a while. So in my Bible study group, we talk about this a lot, and we just sort of roll around in our head, talking with each other, like, what does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be a follower of Christ? Like, you have these rules, you have the 10 Commandments, and you have this, you are supposed to live a certain lifestyle. You are supposed to let the light of God shine, right? So what's the big deal about making some rules, right? Aren't we supposed to live a certain way? Yes, we're supposed to live a certain way. I think that the biggest problem comes from who you are living for. Who are you showing your life off for, right? So religious people would show the way that they are living for you to see them. Like, look at me. I'm a good person. But not only am I a good person, I'm a Christian. I am living the right way. I'm dressing the right way. I work the right job. I have the right amount of children. I have the right marriage. I have not too much jewelry, but gotta show off my blessings. And I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. And if you've spent any time in the church, you get what I'm saying. So a follower of Christ, though, when the Pharisees asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? Well, you got all these commandments to choose from. I mean, specifically the 10, and how are you going to choose? Like, is not murdering better than not having, affairs with people? Honor your father and your mother, all this. So Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, right? That is the greatest commandment. Then there's another commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right? So basically, love is elevated. Now, not love in the sense that we kind of see love where, you're nice to the person that you love. You sort of show them favor more. I mean, even in our society, you can fall out of love, which is not a good thing. But the love of God is found in 1 Corinthians. And if you want, I'll put a link below to my video about that. The love that you are supposed to show for God is way different than what we do here in society on earth, right? Like, it is not jealous. It holds nothing against anyone. It is not envious. It wants the best for everyone. It is patient. It is kind. It is merciful. I mean, it's a pretty deep love. So the love that God shows you is the love you're supposed to show God. And I think that is the biggest difference between being religious and being a follower of Christ. If you are a follower of Christ, and Christ said he only does what his Father tells him to do. So his Father told him, love my people. He loved people. Whatever Jesus did, you can be sure that it was something the Father told him to do. So if you are a follower of Christ and you are trying to emulate what he did, how he lived. It wasn't a list of rules. It wasn't about whether or not you have tattoos. It wasn't about whether your tunic was, knee length or below, or did it touch your fingertips. It wasn't about if you wore red lipstick or if you wore neutrals or not. He never said anything about this. Now, you got your own life, and in your prayer life, if you feel the need to wear knee length or longer skirts, go ahead. But don't go shouting about it to everyone. If you have tattoos, that's your prerogative. I wish that the world in the church world would stop with this ridiculousness. It shouldn't matter. You could be clean cut. You can look like you like to drive a motorcycle. Ride a motorcycle. Shows how much I ride motorcycles. It doesn't matter. What matters is your heart. It gets to your heart. Are you a follower of Christ? Then everything that you do should be out of love. So if you're shutting your mouth about a certain topic because it's not the right time, it's because you're doing that out of love. And you have rationalized quickly that you should keep your mouth shut. Are you working in an orphanage? Are you working in a food bank, volunteering? Are you giving money to people? What are your motivations behind that? Is it out of love for the Father and the people that he loves, a.k.a. everyone? Is it because you feel the overwhelming love from the Father to do this? Or are you trying to be that Christian who has so many volunteering things on their list that you can be elevated in the eyes of others? What's your motivation behind it? Are you religious? Do you need people to see what you do? Do you give your opinion on whether or not you should have tattoos, whether you should be vegan, whether you should have a awesome car or a modest car? You can have opinions on this stuff, but Jesus never told anyone what kind of car they had to have. Jesus never told anyone what length their tunic should be. Okay? Stop. What is your motivation? That will determine if you are a Pharisee or if you are a disciple of Christ. Are you a Pharisee who just wants everyone around them in their Twitter feed and their Facebook page to see how smart they are and just how knowledgeable and how they are living the right way? I mean, they were smarter than Jesus, right? That's how they wanted everyone to see them. They wanted to drop the mic all the time. Or are you a disciple who, even if they were embarrassed to ask a question in front of other people, at least they asked the question? Can you humble yourself enough to ask a question? Does it matter what length skirt I wear? And if God or you decide in your own prayer time with God that it matters, then okay, do it. But don't go preaching to everybody, all right? Should you get rid of all your tattoos? I don't know. Why don't you pray about it? Why does that matter? Your motivation behind stuff. You've got your personal stuff and your public life, everything that you do. And this is hard, right? Like, none of us have gotten this right. I swear I have not gotten this right. Many times I forget to even ask myself, what is my motivation? But if you even just start asking yourself, what's my motivation behind this? You are on track to being a follower of Christ, someone who listens to God in everything that you do, and you will be getting farther and farther away from the religious, rigorous rules that doesn't help anyone. So, what's your answer? Are you a Pharisee or are you a disciple? Tell me what you think below, and if you like this video, you want to see more, hit subscribe, and I'll see you later.